Hello there. This week I've been sharing lots of things about my debut novel, Dead Branches, because it's the 2 year anniversary of its release. So I've talked about some of my favourite fighting fantasy novels, some of my favourite top trumps cards, because all of those things are important to the characters in this text. Um, I'm going to pick up and read a section from this now, which comes from an early chapter. We pick it up with Tom, the main protagonist, with his brother Will and his cousins Liam and Andy. They are meeting at their secret base called Moonbase 1 to discuss the disappearance of their good friend John. They're trying to come up with some kind of plan, but as kids do, also getting distracted by various things. So, listen and let me know what you think. Moonbase 1 was guarded by a dyke and a little spinney out by the field furthest from our farmhouse. A couple of 100 metres up from there, the drove crossed the bypass and would lead on to Wissy Hill if followed far enough. We'd used rocks to build a path across the dyke and hidden the entrance using some elderberry bushes. The advantage of the elderberry was that we always had plenty of the tiny berries at our disposal if we ever came under attack. We dug holes inside Moonbase 1 and cleverly disguised them with interwoven branches, so we could store provisions in there without fear of ever being found. Will and I had been in there about 5 minutes when Liam pushed in through the branches. "Look what I've got," he said, and held out a stack of cards. "Horror top trumps. You've had them for ages," Will said. "No, look," he said, and as he went to show us the cards, he dropped them onto the ground. An evil face stared out at me from one of the cards with sickly yellow flesh. It had a beard and hair, both with horrible curls. I always knew curly hair was a bad sign, and a good reason not to eat crusts. With two horns sticking out of his head, he had sharp fangs and was surrounded by fire. It was called Fire Demon. I'd never seen this card before. "Liam, what are these?" I said as I glanced at the other cards. "Series 2. 32 new cards. Check this one out." Liam picked a card from the floor and held it up to us. "Horror rating 100, Will said. It was called Death and had hideous long teeth and a finger pointing out of the card. "No way," I said. "Only Dracula has a horror rating of 100. "Not anymore," Liam said. "And check this one out." He held up a card called Alien Creature. "Who does that look like?" It was a light brown coloured creature with dark hair in a bowl cut and with ugly twisted teeth. Will laughed. "Bloody hell, it's Mrs. Palmer." I couldn't see it myself. The alien creature was much uglier than Mrs. Palmer, and it only had two fingers on each hand, though its fur was the same colour as her cardigans. "It doesn't look anything like her," I said. "You would say that, wouldn't you?" Will said. "What do you mean?" Liam said. "Didn't you know? Tom always gets crushes on his teachers." Liam and Will rolled around with laughter. It wasn't true. I didn't always get crushes on my teachers. There was one time with Miss Wishaw, who had lovely long red hair, but that was it. "Ooh, Mrs. Palmer," Liam said. He pulled the card towards his face and puckered his lips. "I'm Tom, and I love you." I let them laugh for a minute. "Where did you get them from?" "Mum bought them from us. She saw them in the toy shop down in Market." "Cool, we should have a game." "Where's Andy?" As soon as I said it, he jumped into the base. "Surprise attack!" he shouted as he clung onto my back and squeezed as hard as he could. "Get off!" I yelled. He'd shocked me. For a second, I thought I was really under attack. But it's not like I was close to turning my pants into a lemonade factory. I guessed with the top trumps in front of me and those horrible pictures and all the possibilities running through my head, I was on edge. "Come on," Will said, collecting up the rest of the cards. "Let's play." We played a couple of rounds, and I got to see a few new cards. Some of these monsters I'd never heard of, like the Living Skull or Dr. Sin, and others were gory, like the Fiend and the Venetian Death Cell. "What we should do," Liam said as he handed his last card over to Will, is combine the two sets and play an epic game with all 62 cards. 64, I said. Liam looked at me with a squint, his lip curled in confusion. 2 sets of 32 would be 64. Oh, you're such a big head. Liam took back the cards and started to clumsily shuffle them. Deal them already, will you? Will said, tossing a berry at Liam. Let me shuffle them first. So, what do you think's going on with John? I said. Liam started dishing out the cards. Well, the police are involved. We know that. Maybe Shredder got him, Andy said, his eyes wide. He could have run away from home, Will said. He hated his dad. I don't know, I said. I don't think he hated him. John and I had spoken about our dads a few times, and his didn't seem anywhere near as bad as mine. What do you think happened to him then, Tom? Liam said. I picked up my cards. The top one was the Sorcerer. Maybe something magical had happened to him. Maybe a great wizard had enlisted him to go on an amazing adventure, where he was the hero, like in one of my fighting fantasy books. Or maybe he'd uncovered a monster's lair and had captured him and taken him away. I don't know, I said. After a couple more games, Liam checked his watch and said it was time to go if they would be back in time for dinner, and possibly catch the end of the Uruguay versus Spain match. Will said he was going to walk back with them, and I said I'd walk around the long way across the back field, just in case. They knew what I meant. When I got near the end of the field, where it met the bypass, I heard a rustling in the dike. It was overgrown with stinging nettles. I could see them moving. Over the sound of the heavy vehicles which were levelling the verges at the side of the bypass, I thought I could hear something else. Perhaps a groan. Maybe John had come for a walk around here if he had no one to play with at home. I edged towards the dike and the nettles quivered again. There was a slight breeze, but it didn't seem strong enough to swell the nettles that way. I peered in, but could see nothing through the thickness of the nettles. The grass was not trampled, and none of the nettles were squished or broken, as they would have been if something had fallen in. The machinery stopped, and I could hear slow breathing. John? I said, and the breathing sound changed into a low growl. I thought back to our game of Top Trumps. The card that stuck in my mind was the Fiend, with its sharp talons slicing through its victim's neck. The machines coughed back to life, disguising a louder growl. The nettle seemed to part as if the thing was coming towards me, and I ran down into the field of oilseed rape. I could hear my feet heavy against the ground, and over the snarl of the machines I was sure there was another sound, pounding the ground behind me. It was chasing me, and it was going to tear my head off. It had probably done exactly the same thing to John. I ran faster than ever. I could barely breathe. My face felt like it was burning. I made it across the field, jumped the ditch, and clambered up the other side onto the narrow drove which led straight towards home. I daren't look over my shoulder, because I didn't know its powers. If it captured me in its gaze, I might have been under its spell, and be forced to halt, and I'd be powerless to stop it removing my head and feasting on my tender neck flesh. As much as I didn't want to turn my head, a squeal, like the excited laughter of a toddler, made me look round before I could stop myself. I caught sight of that damned old oak tree. My toes hit something, and I crashed to the ground. I tried to listen for the approaching beast, but all I could hear was my pulse, the blood racing thickly through my veins. I managed to glance over my right shoulder, and could see the tree. Its crooked grin was wider than ever, and the way its branches were shaking made it look as though it was laughing at me. I felt the breeze ruffle my clothes and cool my back, wet with sweat. Every second that passed, I was sure would be my last. But the end never came. And that's where I'll leave it. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much.